All right, hey everyone, I'm back today. I'm with JJ Bezalel, uh, who most of you or many of you know, and if you don't, you should. Uh, Thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me. It's been fun talking the last couple of weeks.
Yeah. So just to give everyone some background here, JJ has been you've been in the industry for what 16 years,
Yeah, January will be 17 years
17
being in
years.
financial publishing.
Ah,
So,
and so you just for everyone who doesn't know JJ, you're basically you were like kind of Adam Mesh's twin in the business.
yeah,
You-
well, I'm more of the behind the guru or behind the scenes type guy, right? I always made sure that operations happened whenever there was something that we needed to pivot to or kind of handle as finding a solution. That's really where I came in, right?
Mm.
So whether that be the early world of, making sure that your emails are getting sent out or, your payment processor got shut down or then we pivoted from being a coaching program and sales to doing options and selling subscriptions, and then the whole world of subscriptions and tracking them, and then getting numbers and scaling companies. So things change and you move and you get through a lot of stuff. And one of the things I realized, especially in the last month, is like you don't even realize what you know until you come out of your little world. And it's been pretty interesting.
Yeah, and that's I think like, kind of like the just the purpose of today's conversation is kind of let's talk about that bigger world because you came up with me to the NYSE, uh,
Mhm.
which
Thank you
was cool to
again.
have you. Yeah, no, it was great to have you
That
with
was
us.
awesome.
Um, and but also like when with Adam being acquired by Tiffin, you guys went over there. You got to see kind of like our world from a different perspective just within that organization,
Yep.
and then you know sitting down with you know Brian at the NYSE, who's the head of like all tech and everything there, and then Cassandra, the head of international cap markets, and like actually talking to them about the space. We get to see their perspective on our industry, um, and so like after this journey now of building a publishing business with Adam, going over to Tiffin, kind of where do you like how would you describe where our industry kind of fits in the broader markets right now, outside of just selling subscriptions?
Yeah. I mean, so our industry, I mean, it's really interesting. It touches everything. It touches the ads you see on TV from, the big trading companies, to what you actually go to watch on CNBC. But the reality is, every single part of finance has something that has to do with our industry, right? And I think that's part of one of the main reasons, Tiffin and the other, VC type companies that are looking for a financial publisher are, because at the end of the day, we are the industry that has the closest relationship to the most lay and novice investors or traders, right? And that's a nuance right there, right? Half of our industry in financial publishing is traders, and half of them are investors. And the bigger companies, like there are trading houses that are looking for those traders and volumes, and there are investment companies that are looking for more accounts under management. It's just, and that's kind of the funny part is how all those branches start touching everything, everywhere along this industry. And one of the things that I think our industry is the driving force for is the actual distribution, right? It's the voice, it's the contact point, it's the handshake and personality and introduction, it's the who that person is going to, because everybody can write about winners or losers and things like that. But at the end of the day, you really see it, and you've seen it through everybody's promotions, is at the end of the day what really wins out is that authenticity, that personality, that sense of community. And I think that any company that can do one of those things, right, not maybe a personality but definitely that community, or if not the community, maybe it's that personality, as long as you can do one of those things and create that sphere of togetherness, that's where you'll win.
Yeah, yeah, I like to think of it because when I started, I guess 2017, 18, I started doing this like exploration between our world and other parts of financial world. Like I had a lot of like things to learn, and it was hard for me to initially to really frame like where exactly like do we fit, until like I kind of just was like I had to translate finance into what I understood, which was direct response. And so for me, what like the idea that or concept that really made it easy for me to start to really see how to start to have these conversations was realizing that there's two sides of finance in capital markets. There's buy side and sell side. And sell side are all the companies that create securities, whether it's, you know, the bankers underwriting stocks and the company's going to sell it, or debt, you know, bonds, like all these things. They're going to create an offer, and that's all it is they're creating an offer. And then the buy side are the investors who are going to invest in that offer. They're going to buy that offer. So they're the customers. And what they're buying is future return. They're buying free money. Like, it's going to make you put money in here and it's going to become more money. Yeah. And it's like, oh, wait, the entire financial world, like that, it's buy and sell side, it's offers and customers. And then once I had that, then that idea that you just said of like, oh, there's distribution issues. And there's different types of distribution. And it's like, okay, now there's the digital retail investor distribution. That's where our world already has the universe. And so who are the parts of finance that are interested in digital retail distribution? Oh, okay, microcap stocks. That was an easy first kind of exploration. And then going and seeing that, and then seeing like within our space, we have this distribution aspect. And then from my work helping Real Vision, seeing that there's also the skill set of digital media, engaging investors, and realizing that you can apply that to any level of investor. And so it's like those two buckets of skill set and current audience are represent two totally different business opportunities, or sectors of business opportunity, because there's like 100 different opportunities in each one. So that helped me really kind of get it, I think. And then it was cool because you got to sit in there, like, I mean, yeah, it's really cool for us to go through like the floor of the exchange, to be there for the opening bell, like to walk around and just be in that like iconic space. But it was a whole different thing when we got to go upstairs, go to the conference room, sit down, and then just actually talk to the NYSE.
I think, you know, the most remarkable part was, you know, it's like one of those things where, you know, Adam used to get it a lot, right? You be somewhere, and whether they know him from the newsletter or know him from, you know, a previous show or something like that, there'd be this connection, and they'd want to say hi and be like, you know, a smile would come about with that connection. You know what I mean? And it was a really cool thing. And it was almost this thing where, you know, this person didn't necessarily belong there, but got to be a part of it. And like, that was cool. So that made them happy. Right. And in that way, I think that's what's fun about our industry, and that interconnectivity is really what holds us together. And that's what opened my eyes at the exchange. This is kind of what I was talking about the other day. You know, I walk in and I sit down, and I'm with Morgan and Dio, and we're sitting down there, and Jim Cramer walks in and he says, "Hey," and I go, "Hey, Jim," and he just keeps walking. It was inside because, you know, he's going to work. It's 8:30 in the morning. Which, by the way, I should talk about the fact that like walking up is so cool, going through security, the fact that they're like, yes, you're supposed to be here. Here's your like visitor pass and name tag, like all that stuff aside. All right, we're inside. We're there. He walks by and they're like, wait, do you know him? And I'm like, yeah, we go way back. Like, of course. What do you mean? And they're like, really? I'm like, no, of course not. Like, but it was cool to be there in that same instance and almost keep my cool. Then I walked into the exchange, and it's like history and finance and everything that I'm a nerd about, like hitting me all at once. And I was literally, my mouth dropped, right? Like almost like I don't belong there. This feeling is the coolest thing ever, right? Because I don't necessarily belong. And this is right, the analogy for our industry. And I keep going through, right? We go see all the different studios, and it's really cool. We check that out. We're there for the opening bell. Mr. Mark Smucker comes down. He's chairman and CEO, you know, chairman of the board and CEO. Very cool, because everybody hugs, takes selfies. Awesome. And then you go up to the boardroom, and like that's the reality. And that's where this analogy becomes real, right? You're sitting in a room, and you have, you know, FinPubs from our industry, you have BDs in our industry, you have events coordinators in our industry, you have, you know, network owners, you had just about every single touch point from the different, parts of our industry, let's say, sitting at this table. And the reality was, based on what the New York Stock Exchange needed, and based on what we were there able to discuss and bring to the table, it wasn't like, oh my God, we're so excited, we should be like, hey, we've met a media. No. We belong there. That was the cool thing. It was like we're peers, we're equals. Everybody like has good ideas and they're intent on listening to you. When you can ask them a direct question and they're like, it gets them thinking, that's big. When you can make a suggestion and they're like, oh, your industry has insight, that's really cool. I'd love to say that it all came from me, but if everybody at that table, and that was the kind of cool part, right? That interconnectivity piece was that everybody at that table belonged there. And we would have all, at least I for one, walk into that room prior to that, and I'm like, holy shit. And the holy shit moment came to me when I sat down and realized, wait, I can help here. Like, yes. I can actually do something to improve or make this situation better. I actually do. Like, this is cool. And so does our industry. And everything our industry touches. We're a lot bigger. And that's what I realized coming out of the one company that I've been with for so long. We're a lot bigger than just what we think we're in. We're a lot bigger. And, the exposure, John, comes from you at the events, right? We've done the FMS summits in the past, and you have your Jacksonville event coming up on the 25th and 26th, right? I think. And sorry, I had to do it for you.
Appreciate that.
But the idea is that there is so much more out there than you realize. Being an independent publisher, being an employee in our industry, just being in the financial media space and, thinking about the big boys, because they are big boys. But when you realize that like the ocean that is possible behind you, right? And that you're looking at like just, a drop of water almost by comparison, like ocean, drop of water, not like you're a big ship in the water. It's like drop of water. It's crazy how big the world is. That was the big thing for me.
Yeah, no, and I loved it because I didn't know what was going to happen going in. Like, Vince Molinari from FinTech TV set the whole thing up, and like he's just an amazing person, and he has great relationships there. But like, you never know. Like he can't. He's not like controlling the NYSE. He's not directing. He's asking for meetings, and I'm like, are we going to get the people that we think we're going to get to come in, or are they going to send an intern in and it's going to be like, oh, our junior associate? And it's like, no, like we got the head of tech and the head of international cap markets. And then I think like, and so Vince is like, I'm just going to throw it to you and you're going to kind of frame the conversation. And I'm like, all right. And so Brian, who's the head of tech, was in there and he was super receptive. And I was like, oh, this is great. And then Cassandra comes in and she was, I'll be honest, like she was a little bit intimidating in the sense of like, because she, for everyone who wasn't there with us, she was like, like a career at Goldman Sachs.
Oh yeah, 24 years, I think she said.
Right. And like now she's head of international cap markets, the NYSE, and she gets down and we do quick introductions and she literally just kind of looks at us and she's like, okay, so what's your value prop to the NYSE? Like, explain that.
What
are
you bringing to the table right there?
And it was like, oh shit. She's like going right to the heart of it.
Yeah.
And so then I'm like, okay, so here I have to go and like make the value proposition and basically talk about us as digital distribution and then like to see like her be like, okay, that makes sense. And Brian was all in on the idea when I kind of soft mentioned like, hey, we should do some events, bring the industry. Right. It's not bring a company, it's bring the industry to kind of meet with companies and go through. And then he was like, we should do quarterly events.
Yeah.
And then she was like, I think an event is a great first step. And all of a sudden, it's to your point, like we belong.
No,
like,
you're telling it, but she goes, an event would be a great first step. Or no, he goes, an event would be a great first step. And she responds with, yeah, but that's not going to be sticky enough. What we need is something that's going to have, continuity. And the suggestion was, oh, well, why don't we have a quarterly event? And the response then was, that's a great idea. And then you get to respond with, that is a great idea. You guys made a great idea right here. I am happy that you guys thought of this idea here. Sorry, it was so cool.
Well, they were so open, and I think that's the lesson is that like they were so open to us, Like,
Yeah, yeah.
and then they started talking
Listen,
about
but not for
ETFs.
nothing, we will provide that value.
Right.
And that's the thing. There's an immense amount of value that we will provide to them, not just like they look at us for a number of reasons. I think they look at us for actual future listings, propagation, right? Filling their pipeline with possible people who might come in future list, right? There are public companies in our space. So, even if possibly moving them over from one exchange to another, and uplist them, let's call it, right? That could be a possibility. There's also the fact that, like, yes, we do have that distribution, but just there, right? Just in that one point that we just made, there's two different reasons that they want us in that room, right? So I'm sure they have others that you and I aren't even thinking about because, we don't live in their space or whatever. But we have enough on that Venn diagram that we share a lot of space, and we definitely can provide value for them.
And that was the head of two of the groups there. And then like, you had this great experience working with an ETF.
I did.
And they brought up ETFs. And so we were just like, hey, tell that. So you tell everyone that story just so they understand like where this is, because that's a whole other avenue of opportunity.
Yeah. So so this was also, my working with Magnify Communities and everybody there. They actually just, it's one of those opportunities where you get put in a room with somebody and all of a sudden, something happens. So Adam had met, one of these fund advisors, and he had gotten basically an ask from them, basically saying, hey, can you, I'm trying to turn off my things here. Apologies. I don't know how to do this. So he basically said, a great idea. I'd love to have you just come on an event. The idea is just to provide content. We just want to teach you how we use options inside of an ETF. It's a really cool idea, especially for again, our little piece of the world, which is very option centric, and was really informative. But as part of that, right, there was the natural reality that, during our event, while we were doing it live during market hours, their average, shares traded is like, a couple thousand or something like that. And I think it was something like, I want to say it's 4 10-fold. It might have been a lot more than that. Like, it was an insane number not insane, like, oh my God, we're the biggest thing in the world, but just like, wow, we can have real traction, real impact just because we're providing an audience, you know what I mean? And people are interested. And like, I'm not saying that it's directly I can't say, yes, somebody came in and went and did it. No, but the idea is we provided an opportunity, provided a stage. And, I don't want to go overboard too much, but I think we had a real impact. I think there was a lot that the NYSE thought from that also that was impactful, more so than anything else, was just that, wow, if I put somebody in front of this audience, I'll have real true impact, and it can be tactical that day. They have their CNBCs, they have their distribution channels. Cool. What they don't have is the relationship that we have. And our audiences are built for being receptive to that kind of spotlight and hosting type of an event, at least from where I sat, because my life was putting on webinars for a good last decade, let's say. But those webinars are both informative and they are impactful. They really, you can see, wow, average volume has gone up quite a lot. Like, that's cool. That's not just one person. Like, maybe I could have bought 100 shares, but I didn't move it as many, like, that was a legit nice move. So it was very cool.
And that's where, like, and the cool thing about the ETFs is, obviously there's a group there, and there's somebody who's head of the ETF group, and Vince has a show called the ETF Rundown. And so he basically has a channel from the NYSE to his media platform where all the event ETF managers are coming in and doing that. And he's willing to do deals with other people because he has sponsorship rights for that, and can then do like a sales process in their guesting process, maybe, or come up with a way to connect.
If you can provide an audience, you can talk to Vince, and you guys can work together and and get something out there. That's that fun part. And it's good. It's education. Think about it. Like, most of these people are providing some sort of financial literacy or some sort of something that you might not have thought of in that same way. And like just that little bit of knowledge can make a difference in a trader or an investor's life. Like, listen, at the end of the day, it's going to sound corny as hell, but at the end of the day, like I actually care about the person that is reading what somebody I'm putting out there is writing, or listening to what somebody I'm putting out there is saying. I care. That's the company that I've always worked with, right? Mesh is that guy for a reason, for real and in front of the camera, because he just can't stop being him, right? And he would never tell somebody to do something that isn't like his, mother or his sister or something like that. And in the same way, like I want to be impactful and I want to bring true good stories and value to those people. And, these companies that are listing in the New York Stock Exchange, these companies that Vince is bringing to light, these companies that are out there that we just don't realize. That's another big thing, right? That's the other part of this whole last month plus that I've realized. There's just so many companies out there that do so many things, wonderful things, cool things, scary things with technology, but like they're all very, very cool. And a lot of them are either being monetized or trying to be sold or trying to come to market or just trying to tell their story to get that swelling of financing, right? Because they're looking for money in a tough environment, right? Like we haven't talked about the macro environment or anything like that, but they're for a company that's trying to come out. The one question that I did ask the exchange was what? It was, how many companies have come out in the last year? And I asked the question, how many companies did the New York Stock Exchange list in the year? And the response was, how many the industry listed? And I was like, why? That's a pain point. Wow. Like they need companies to list, which means there are companies out there that aren't getting investors. The whole, again, we're going to go down a rabbit hole possibly. So I don't want to do that. I'm going to keep it on the distribution side. But that's the reality, right? Everything touches our industry so well. They need that audience. They need that voice, whether it's in print, on podcasts, in email newsletters, on videos, from FinTech TV. There's so many ways that we can help move that along to the right investor.
Yeah. And so then think about that opportunity. And this is what Vince provides for us. And so Vince and I are partnering on this whole new initiative. But he got us in the room at the New York Stock Exchange. He can get us in the room and at all the exchanges. I mean, he's got a global exchange network. He's he's at the NASDAQ. The day before I took a couple people, we did some video at the NASDAQ, and then he's got London. He's got a studio in Tel Aviv. He's got the Borsano in Italy, which is just, who doesn't want to figure out a way to do something there? It's Italy. Come on. Abu Dhabi, like the global markets in Abu Dhabi, right? So they had Finance Week, which is like a huge event. It's like Fashion Week but in Abu Dhabi, and Vince got the center stage, like at the main stage during the main days. And he's basically saying, like, he has all these relationships, and he's basically asked me to come in and work with him to kind of build out a whole ecosystem of like meetings, events, deals with our industry around the whole thing, and some other industries. But like he's such an awesome guy, and like what they've built is so unique that the opportunities that we got in that room, like multiplied around the world now. It's mind-blowing. But I think I want to go back to one of your points, because I think that piece of you saying like you care about the end investor, like this is a point of competition in the space that is gonna, for people who want to transition into like doing business in this world, is going to matter more and more. Like if you're perceived as a publisher who is just outrageous, and it's going to be harder like you're not going to be able to be in the room, right? And that's not me saying that. That's like they're going to be like, we don't want you in the room, because it's a different culture.
Listen, I mean, I wore a jacket. It was great. I got a compliment on it. I was super happy. Brian Bauman, like head of technology, he's like, hey, nice jacket. I'm like, I'm really happy right now inside, but I'm just going to say thanks so much. I like yours too. That was a point where I geeked out. It was really like, I can't express how cool this actually was. The Buttonwood Agreement, seeing all like the spaces. This is an immense place, and like I'm talking gilded ceilings when you walk in, and legitimately gilded. Like they're absolutely beautiful. the whole thing was very, very cool. But then you realize that like you're not in a museum, you're like living it, like you're
Right.
part of it, and like you can actually help to drive it forward. It's very cool.
Yeah.
And yeah, Vince is you have this graceful way of opening doors and creating opportunity. And
Thanks.
Vince has, basically also done the same. And it's a wonderful attribute. And also it's like, but it's how both of you have really built your businesses. Separately
Thanks.
and now let's say together, right? Like that's been the way that you provided that impact and return. So it's good.
No, I'm
Excited
really
for all of
excited.
it.
Yeah, no, I
Yeah,
think that.
yeah. I mean, and that's the cool part, right? I think that's what, if we're talking to a publisher, for instance, right now who's watching this, right? Like that's the cool part. There's gonna be something really cool to write about and talk about and offer insight to, right? And like that is our industry. That's what we do. So like, not only are we talking about actually physically doing these cool things, the touch point for a publisher is, hey, you have direct access to the people that are doing it. Okay, cool. For somebody who like wants to sell media rights or have access to an ad network, okay, you're going to have a new set of ads, publishing. It all works together. And like, that's the cool part. Like everything, ebbs and flows, right? But pivots are really good times. And right now, the pivot is to this expansion of, really the power of distribution and capital markets, right? Like this view that what we can do, and to his credit, right, Ian, right, the CEO from Magnify Communities, Ian's whole thesis that started Magnify Communities, it started with the acquisition of our company first and 6 subsequent ones, right? It was this idea, which is correct. Just to be clear, he's 100% right. I want to be as clear and concise about that. Because he's right? Like, and we saw it firsthand. That's why we were the first acquisition. We saw that, the value of our subscriber was made so much better by the guy right behind us, as opposed to us being a part of that. And that's what this opening of our reality, like in this room, right, had seen, is that no, wait, we can still capitalize on that. There are ways of doing that. You just have to understand, like, not just that, as an owner of a publisher, let's say, you have to understand what capital markets are, how they work, right? And get that education in like, oh, there are 150, I learned this sitting down at the table, right? In a side conversation with Jim, but like, that was the conversation, right? There's M&A was going on all over the place in the last year. It just wasn't in the public market. It was in private capital markets. Companies were bought and sold. 100 financial publishers or publishers in general were bought and sold in the last year. That's essentially the same or more than the entire listings of, the public market.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. So if you didn't know that, or didn't know you could tap into a capital market, oh my God, there's a new opportunity for you as an owner too. Okay. This is huge.
Yeah.
There's
so that's another one. So Jim McDonald, who's actually coming to Jax, he's another guy, like he's part of this business. There's this whole business community, not just around FinTech TV, but like around each of the exchanges, that includes all the private equity firms, a slew of investment bankers, the lawyers. Like there's a literal business community that by doing stuff there, you start to be able to tap into, and those relationships and the information and the business opportunities that happen are enormous. I mean, Jim was telling me, he's like, yeah, I have this billionaire that's looking to invest in a bunch of companies and maybe roll up a few companies, and he's just trying to decide which sectors to go in, and financial media and publishing seems to be one that he's getting really interested in. And you're just like,
it's good to
cool,
friends.
like we should talk.
Yeah.
And so you have all that stuff.
$5 million investment, I can explain. It's like chunking, I wouldn't even have to sign off on it.
Yeah, but I also like that, because I remember that Brian Hunt, who at the time was the editorial director at Stansberry, wrote an article called "The Perfect Newsletter Editor," and Brian's over at done a killer job with Investor Place, growing that. But I remember like he had stuff in there like leads off every issue with an interesting story, and often personal ones, right? And I think about like bringing like editors and gurus into the New York Stock Exchange, and how many promos have we seen over the years that started with this relatively minor connection that somebody used to say that they were an insider, and then contrast that with like, hey, like we can actually plug you in to where you're a real insider globally.
Yeah, you can literally take a seat at the table or take with pictures or take a seat in the studio on the floor, sitting, living it, doing it, like for real.
Yeah, and then we had like and then go a couple blocks, like two blocks over to Harry's, which is like this historic
Oldest steakhouse, I think, in New York City or whatever.
Yeah, and it's like the Wall Street watering hole. And actually, the day after we were there, Harry actually rang the opening bell because it was an anniversary of Harry's. And like, but like, who's going to come over and have drinks there? And then you're sitting down with like in building relationships at that level, just like you do when you come to FMS. Like you meet people and you start to build relationships, and that's the cool thing about having that quarterly event is going to be, you can start to build like real relationships and friendships, and now you're plugged in ways that and your team can be plugged in ways that they couldn't be before. And that's new promo ideas, new product ideas, new stories, new everything.
It's also new access. I can't stop saying it. Like it's you know, I could write you copy right now about my story, about my walk down, about me, sleep, like not being able to sleep the night before, about like telling my kids about it. I was giddy like a kid. When you texted me that I was going, I was like, what is going on in my life? Like, how is this happening right now? Like, I haven't had a better day. And literally throughout the entire day, I didn't stop smiling. And then in the Uber back, when I look back and, on the night, and then you can just, there's your, start with that personal story and then go right into like, and here is what I learned from it that I want to share with you, right? Like, and here's how it can help you in your everyday life. Like, you didn't know you could invest in a company that doesn't have, a public listing yet. There are actual markets that you can go. But did you know that some are more risky than others? Did you know that there's a way to learn, hey, there's a better way of doing this? Okay, cool, because I did, and like half of me wants to go build it for people just because I want them to have a better option, right? But I'm being pulled in a lot of different ways right now. Like there's just so much, and there's just so much out there. We went a week ago, more than that at this point, and I still haven't lost the like excitement, the ability to sleep, and just thinking of ideation and like how this could be the future. Like it's going to be part of my future, and I expect it to be part of this industry's future, right? At reality.
I see this, and this is, and I know, like, I put it together, so I'm not trying to, like, this is going to sound like self-serving, but like I really felt like that meeting is kind of like a catalyst event for the industry, and that like we're gonna look back 5 years from now and it's gonna be like that meeting like changed the landscape of what
it's also like there's something that we're leaving out in a way that like I kind of want to just make sure to explain, because we talked about the drop of water in an ocean, and like that analogy, just to be very clear why it's so important, is because what is the one reason that we all say we don't belong there? It's because they have the biggest bank account. That's really at the end of the day why we sit there being like, oh, we don't belong. Oh, we didn't, we're not a $50 million, to get in and get listed company. Oh, we're not that. That's not the point, right? That's not the point. They do have the biggest money. And the reality is this is a reservoir. That's what it is, right? It's what's his name? Uncle Daddy Warbucks, not Warbucks. What's the duck who jumps in? Come on.
Oh, Scrooge McDuck.
Scrooge McDuck jumping into his thing. Like, this is like what I felt being at the New York Stock Exchange. It's just oozing out of everything. They have space there that you would think, oh my God, I can sell this space for an hour and literally take $100,000. And they're like, hey, it comes with doing X, Y, and Z. And not only that, that means that they have that excess $100,000 to go sponsor something or pay for something or bring you in. Or it is crazy how much more money is out there in the industry when you bring these worlds into our world, where we think a budget is X, those budgets are Y.
Right.
Where when I thought my little company was a rounding error, let's say in our industry, our industry is around you know the numbers, right, on institutional investment and everything else, right? Like the big actual wallets coming into our space. The normal money that we're used to or that we've seen in the past, if you get access to this new world in the right way, like, and I don't know what I'm pitching here, just the reality of the situation.
No.
That's what's at stake. That's what's available. That's why everybody that was at that table was like, how do I make sure this moves forward, right? Because like they knew that that was possible from our side. But again, we started this conversation really by talking about how the New York Stock Exchange really needs us. And that's our value add. That's what we don't want to miss out on. That's what this whole industry, it doesn't have to just be the New York Stock Exchange. It's that level, that tier of world, and our tier, if you want to call it that, we thought was down here. It's not. We're literally like, you know, organs that touch each other, and things go through. You just have to find the points. That's it.
And so I did this video like when I was talking about some of this stuff, I guess 2 years ago, year and a half, something like that. And I basically described our industry as like, our entire industry is like a pimple on the ass of finance. And Michael Bressler, who, hey Mike, if you're listening, he was like, you know, I saw that, and you're totally right. And I went into Agora because he's had a moonshots over at Agora Central, and like he went in and like told him, like Miles or Bob or something like that, and I'm like, oh, that's kind of embarrassing. I'm like, just a pimple on the ass of finance. And they're like, what does that mean? And it's just what you're saying. It's like the amount of money in our space compared to the amount of money that flows through the New York Stock Exchange, and then through like the rest of the industry that is relevant, that we're relevant to, and especially at this moment, like it's insane. Like I have a guy that I know now who he's a media buyer to $79 billion asset manager, and he was spending like 30K to acquire a customer, and he's like, well, they got it down to 20 and they're trying to get it down to 10 or 12, and they're willing to pay CPAs on that.
That's right. You were saying the guys, when they get an account on their map, their CPA is 10K now. For one dude, one of your subscribers who's like, oh wait, I actually have real money and I'll put it with them. Sure.
They have like that's one company in one little subsector of one little subsection of finance, that like the amount of money that's sitting there and the amount of business opportunities. And I think that's the thing that like is most exciting and most vague, is kind of like, okay, well, how do I sell subscriptions? And I can list all the different ways that this, helps with promo, it helps with product, it helps with credibility, it helps with, but the thing that's vague is, well, what are the new business opportunities that you didn't anticipate that are coming? Maybe it's the M&A piece, maybe it's the investor piece, maybe it's the transaction piece and how you can interact but like, there's so many of those things that it's hard to like just say, oh, this one thing. Like I can list out, like we could spend an hour just talking about and just listing, not even discussing, just listing out all the different ways.
Question. We can spend 10 hours just going one individual branch of each and every one of them.
Right.
I mean, that's the thing, right? We're talking about this real impact that like it's crazy when your head is down that you just simply don't see.
Yeah. And that's what, like,
for lack of a better way of saying.
For me, it's like I want to put these, so that Vince and I are like, we're doing the events with the NYSE, but we're really like going to start, I don't want to call it a mastermind because it's not a mastermind. It's a business network that we're connecting all of the business communities at all the exchanges that he's at together. Because even like, it's so weird because even like our world doesn't talk to that part of finance, but then you go to like the major exchange over here and a major exchange over here, and those business communities, other than at like the highest level, like in Goldman or someone, they're not connected. And so we're basically building out that's our goal here, is to build out a capital markets executive network, but kind of put it, because it serves Vince's view of the world and my view of the world, put media and publishing like kind of at the center of the whole network.
Yeah.
And
exactly. And it's like, how many of these actual listed companies or funds, as a for instance, have their own internal investor relations marketing companies or divisions, let's call it? Probably some of the bigger ones, right? The ones that you would have heard of, right? Like JP Morgan does for Jeppy and these kinds of things. But the reality is, our industry could serve those companies a hell of a lot better. And similar to the event that you did with the cannabis CEOs, that's a great way to let's use that as an example. It's a great way to explain it. So for those who didn't know, right, John had a CEO summit, a Canna Trust. What did you call it?
Oh, I call it the Canna Network events,
Canna.
but like,
Okay, yeah,
that one was all cannabis.
So there was one in DC at the Baltimore at the Pendry that I attended, and I actually ran into one of my good college friends because he was the CEO of an extraction technology company, but which is also very, very cool. But what was my friend looking for? What was Dave looking for? Right, he was looking for his story to be told to a broader audience. That's at the core, right? Without spinning it around too much, that's what he was looking for. He might not have at the time, or even if he did have an investor relation type of department, he needed exposure. He needed the everyday person to know what his stock was called. He needed them to know that it was dual listed in Canada or whatever it was. He needed people to know, because what he needed was investors. He's listed, he needs money. He needs people buying his stock. He needs the price of that stock going up, because then there's a market. That's what he really needs, right? But he can't do that without a voice. He can't get those bigger loans from his bank or wherever it might come from without showing the float or more money coming in. So he comes to that event or one of these events just as for instance, as a CEO of just one of the companies, right? But there was 20 plus companies there. And that's what I mean about the message. Some of them had such cool. One was literally taking and like getting carbon. It was awesome. It was. But the point is, and apologies because I speak really fast and I go on tangents all the time. But the point is really that again, coming back to the power of distribution, meaning the power and value of your subscribers, right? And of your voice, if you're a publisher or a guru, let's call it, right? Because you can have more impact than just your copy or just your offer. There is other things that your industry, not just your competitors' offers even, which by the way, if you aren't sending, you should, because there's no reason not to. But sorry,
it's true.
I had to let a little Brett in there. But you know, you should be realizing that there are other people, and you just need that connection, right? And John, again, it's at the exchange level too, right? But that's the idea, is that more companies need their voice heard. More companies want investors. It's not just public markets. It is these private markets. And there's a whole lot in between.
Yeah. And that distribution really piece, like, so like you think about like, okay, a public company, small cap, needs retail distribution. They would love to get their story out. They do paid media, and there are plenty of companies in our space who serve them. They like the earned media too, which is what I like, is how I like when we do those events. I was always like, look, I'm going to bring in the people who are not going to take money, because their relationship with their subscribers is paramount. And if they like you, they will cover you. And if they don't, they won't. And everyone's thrilled with that, because if they can get somebody to cover them because they like the company and they write about it because they like it, then it has a better response. But then on that other bucket that I mentioned about like skill set, like realize like digital distribution and building a media channel to family offices or to other asset managers or to like kind of the whole vertical list of investors in a niche, because you're really getting that niche, like that gives you an enormous amount of influence, an enormous amount of power. There's tons of revenue there. There's tons of ways to monetize it that are beyond subscription or even advertising. There's like there's deep wells or deep veins of revenue streams to be tapped by looking at that, and then realizing that like if you can do that, like you can go like if you just had an RIA list, like a publishing list to RIAs, like that allows you to open doors that are really big.
Or even if you just know that your list is accredited investors and who's on your list that is an accredited investor, right? Like, at the end of the day, it's a valuable piece of information to know about your list, right? If you said it, if you have RIAs, I mean, think about it. We all, whoever's on the email side will know this. How many at JP Morgan Chase, at Morgan Stanley's, how many are your subscribers? Lots. This is the kind of thing that like you don't realize really your power, because you don't realize, like, no, they're not stealing trades from you, but they are getting ideation. They are getting knowledge. They are getting, their finger on the pulse of something else that they're interested in. And they should be interested in it, because we made a whole industry and business out of it. So of course there's something here, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's part of just the vein, right? There's always going to be, there's so much opportunity. I think that's part of, right, part of what's going to happen in Jacksonville. It's not just for publishers and everything else. It's for kind of learning all these different pieces that were at that table, right? That are veins and channels, we should call them, really, right? Like tributaries of, this distribution channel.
Yeah, that's where, like, I think about the industry a lot. Like when we started FMS, like my concept was take trader education and investment newsletters that weren't really talking and mash them together, and that was great. I'm almost starting to think that we're at a period of where the industry is growing so much that there's going to be a disaggregation, where like the opportunities in the trading space are growing and huge. Just like you said, there's big money coming for the trading space from the brokerage world, everywhere else. But they're starting to and there's overlap, but it's starting to differentiate that opportunity versus like stock newsletter opportunity versus media channel opportunity, because it's growing so much. There's so many different, like the niches themselves are getting bigger.
Yep.
And that means the opportunities and the ways that they develop are getting more unique. And so I think about that a lot, is like, are we at this? I don't think we're quite there yet, but I think we're moving in a direction towards that kind of like more disaggregated industry again.
Yeah, well, listen, if we're talking about it more on a macro, right? The reality is the public has done the same, and the market that we're serving is we're just kind of following that market, right? That they're bifurcating themselves. They're splitting themselves up into groups and into thematic searches and into everything else that's out there, right? Like that's why you have an ESG industry. That's why you also have, by the way, this was cool to learn, an anti-ESG and Second Amendment rights ETFs. So again, as like a funny, for instance, if you have a very, leaning crowd, you have actual funds that on their premise, the reason that they're set up is because of one of these other topics, these topical relational topics, right? Like the right to bear arms. So I'm going to have Remington and Lockheed Martin and everybody else under the sun in there, because this is, our belief, this is what we're going to stand on, and we want to make sure that there is investment, doing that. And then you have the opposite in equal opposite, right? It's like a fulcrum. I mean, there's let's be real. There's the ARK fund, right, which is Cathie Wood's funds and things like that. And there are literally the anti-Cathie Wood funds and people that have made up ETFs just to short whatever she's long, and the exact opposite. And guess what? Kramer. Both of those funds want more people in them. And you know what's funny? The people that are going to buy those shares live on all your lists. It's just as simple as that. And they're the people that you're marketing to. And that's what we're here for.
Yeah. And that's it, is that like, and go back to Ian Rosen, who like, he and I see the media transformation, I think very similarly, is that this moment in time is like, we've talked about the digital transformation of capital markets for years now. And for the first phase of it, it was all about the fintech platform, like the tech platform, this and that. And this next cycle of it is all about the media side, and how do you actually engage all kinds of investors around distribution channels, and whoever wins the battle of distribution wins the battle.
Listen, look at it just as an Apple or Google type of thing, right? What's in your pocket right now? Is it an iPhone or a Google phone? Because if it's something else, I'm going to ask a couple questions. But otherwise, for the most part, you can have one or the other, right? Like that's all that's out there. Essentially, you have an iOS or an Android phone, if we're saying it more like specifically, right? Like that's the reality. Like what's in your pocket? Who are you voting for? It's the same idea. You're choosing one or the other. Like in the same way, the audiences are doing the same. And to Ian's point, it's like I want to say Netscape Navigator or the initial Internet Explorer, or Prodigy. Like if you got in knowing what those were, you were set up to do better as every other advent of the internet came. But otherwise, you're somebody who's like calling up, you're somebody being like, wait, how do I do this? What's going on? Like I would say that you've seen it, he's seen it, you're both ahead. I think everybody is catching up. And I think right now, like you said, it was a catalyst event. The spark happened. The touch point exists now. There's like, I agree. The bell is rung essentially now. Like it's officially the gate is open. Everybody better get off to the races, kind of thing.
The quarterly events are going to
Ian
be starting soon.
Because Ian and we digressed for the topic, but Ian's ending point was that your value, your subscriber. That's what we brought this all back to. And he's right, because he can tie that in now in almost a closed loop. That's what he's trying to build. And you know why they changed their name? Because of what you just said. It's a community, because you need a community. You need to build something. You need to have people feel a part of it so that they want it to be there. They want it to be personal, and that should be their approach. And that will win with a whole set of people. Damn the, not every, you don't need to serve everybody, right? Like you need to serve a market that makes complete sense for you. And if you can, foster and nurture and build that by, almost by proxy, because he acquired it first, and then he's like, wait, this is what we're going to do. But he's right? And it might take a little bit more time, but that will work. That will work because the message is there, the concept is there, and his concept really, I don't want to belabor the point, but his concept is right. And it's the reason I'm almost belaboring is because I want to get it so clearly through this conversation that everybody really needs to value what they do and what they provide to their audiences. And they need to know that they just need the right access points, right? Or they need, and listen, if you're a publisher is looking for something that you just need help with in marketing, there's that too, right? There's copywriters, Brett was on the other day, right?
Yeah.
Kenny and Charles were on the other day in terms of media buying, right? Brett's on about all the different copywriters and different activities. You can do all those things. And John, to kind of put a clip on this, like that's the point, right? You've brought all that together here in our industry, right? And now we're saying, hey, there's more to it. So don't wait for John to be proven right, kind of thing. Like come along for the ride now. Get involved now, do it now, see it now, because it's here already. And I got to luckily be in the room where it happened. Like, not to quote the Awesome Hamilton show, but like, yeah, man, it was cool. We did have drinks where Hamilton may or may not have had his beers, so that was cool.
I'm gonna say it must have been the place.
That's obviously. I mean, I sat in the same seat. It was still there. Yeah, of course. Just like I knew Jim from way back.
That's right, from way back. I think Hamilton left his coat and was still on the hook. Good. But yeah, no, like, this is, it's one of those things that I keep talking about, and I was so excited to have you guys there, just because sometimes I feel like I'm talking about this stuff and I'm telling you, like, no, you don't understand the reception I got, and everyone's like, yeah, whatever. And I've heard that from you. Even Adam actually said that. He's like, John, like, I listen to stuff and you say this stuff, and then I'm like, yeah, I don't know, maybe. And then a year later, it's like, that's what happened. You were right. And it's not because I'm like smart. It's because like I'm out there like talking to different people all the time.
You are out there. The one thing that I will say, living in the world that I did, right? It was 16 years where I worked at with one team and one family, essentially, right? We got acquired in April 2021. I'm in the process of moving on from that, and it's coming out of that for the last couple of weeks, and just seeing everything else that's out there. That's where you have one of the greatest capacities, because you get to sit there, like, I forget what it's called in the submarine that like goes up and you can look everywhere, but that's where you get to sit and see things, when essentially that analogy is everybody else has got their head downs in the sub doing their job. You got the periscope. That's what it is. You get periscope depth, right? You get to see around and look. And that's why you can bring things together and see it from a different point of view. And that's why it's also so hard for the people who are in it to be like, wait, what?
Right. No, I know. I do stupid things. Like I took that gig with Real Vision years ago where I had to go to the Caymans a week a month for 6 months, and then New York a week a month for, and it sounds great, except the Caymans are not really that awesome. And I know I'm offending a few people with that, but
they always sound great.
It sounds great, but it's not for me. The thing is that like I did that not because I'm like, hey, I need to go do this gig or whatever. It was, I need to like, I want that network. Like, so I started like taking over a role where I was basically working with all the institutional newsletter writers. So the people who were selling the $50,000 a year newsletters. And then seeing the fact that like Real Vision had in that early version of it, like they were getting $1 trillion asset managers engaged. And like, that's crazy to me that you had digital media just around investment content that was actually getting like the professional world engaged and kind of trying to understand that and trying to build relationships through that. That was super valuable to me just as an exploratory kind of thing. And I don't know what it is. Like I just spent like the last 5 years, I just got this bug in my head, and this might be my ADHD. Just like you get, you get a thing in you, and like if you don't scratch that itch, it just keeps you awake. And so for whatever reason that I had the itch was to see like, how do I explore where our world fits in broader finance? And so I went like, we're not even getting into the VC conversation, which is another huge story, or the private equity conversation,
and avenue and tributary and all the other stuff. And that's every part of the financial world that's cool. That's the reality.
And so like, but now we're at the spot where like can bring the whole ecosystem along and open up a new chapter, I think, in FinPubs. And so like I was so excited to have you guys with me, just because I was kind of like that, like, see, I'm not fucking crazy. I'm not fucking crazy, right?
Well, it was also fun for me because like for me, this is some of the people that I've known for like the longest time in the industry. So it was like big hugs for like haven't seen you in 5+ years, it's like it's very cool to see a lot of people. And that was really, really cool. And I mean, and we haven't touched on so many things, right? We haven't touched on the regulatory spaces with, the Reg C, sorry, the Reg A, the Reg CF, and the Reg D space, the VC groups, the ETFs, the influencer campaign. There's like, we can, that's the problem, right? Like, we had to have some notes on the ideas that we wouldn't try and get too far away from them, right? Like, but these are all things that we should be discussing, right? Like, whether or not it's something where like, you put them together almost like a module course, right? But like the reality is it'd be informative, not just for our industry too. It's like, it'd be great for investors to know that this part of the world exists, right? And like, I just can spin up a FinPub just about that. There you go. It's your idea. But the reality is there's all this stuff, and there's all these access points, and there's all these ways of, getting intertwined in different parts of the industry. You just lift your head up for a second, talk to John, call me, call anybody, like just put yourself out there. That's what I've, right? And talking about the ephemeral stuff, right? But like, just put yourself out there. Put yourself out there, make a phone call, text somebody, see what's going on, and be like, hey, I have this idea, or hey, is this possible? Find out, get that itch that John's talking about. Like the real entrepreneurs and like people that care are going to get it, right? They're going to get that thing that I got to ask, I got to find out.
I think there's crazy like realizations to have when you're sitting there and you're like, well, let's say you want to be involved in a certain aspect of like pick your niche, pick your business sector, like D2C or like ad tech or energy, like, and then realize like, what if you had an audience, like an engaged audience of 20 family office managers with like real family, like substantial offices, like, and it was just 20 people and they were just reading your free stuff, but like they really were reading it. Like the amount of like deal making power you all of a sudden have,
right? You could just serve them with, hey, so I was approached by this company that had like a really cool idea, and like I actually don't think there's much in that space. And it's something that I was thinking about investing in, but I don't necessarily have the assets to do it. One of those 20 is all you would need, right? And like you can be a part of that too. Introduction.
A list of angel investors, like funding startups, like the amount of ways that you can use what we have, the amount of ways that you could kick something off or spin something out of your existing business, the amount of just like branded content you could do for ETFs on your existing list. Like, oh, there's a whole other advertising stream.
And that's also like just the reality, right? Like if there's something that you're interested in or more interested in, you're probably not the only one. So don't think that like, you shouldn't go get started or find or start an interest, because now it might be an interest, but quickly you'll be the expert in the room, right? Like
Yep.
that's kind of just how it works.
Right.
Yeah, the only
That's
reason, I mean, that works for everything, right? But for real in our industry, that's it. Time and experience, they trump pretty much everything else, right?
Yeah.
You've seen it before, you've been there before, you've done it before, you know this better than the next guy and pretty much everybody else in the room.
Yeah.
That means
I've already stuck my foot in my mouth 15 times, and I can tell you what not to say. let's make this meeting smooth.
If anybody needs some coaching on that, I am very good at that. And very good about learning not to do that. So
but no, this is cool. This is great. I appreciate you like talking with me today.
Yeah, man.
I'm excited to have you come down and MC in Jacksonville. So that
I am gonna MC. I told you I bought a jacket and it looked nice.
Nice.
Although we're getting in the argument phase with my wife about whether or not I'm gonna shave for it or not, because most people like the beard, she does not. So we'll see what happens when I see y'all in Jacksonville.
Yeah. Well,
Bahamas, so we're gonna go no beard, get all nice and single.
It's a good spot. It's a good spot.
No,
I'm actually bringing the guys from the Bahamas are actually coming. There's the securities exchange down there. They're coming to
oh, they're coming too?
Yeah.
Are they bringing the prime minister though this time?
Probably not. But it was cool to have him. It was cool to have some of the copy from my website in his speech.
Yeah, that's cool.
That was funny.
Cameras are like, who are you, sir? You're like, I'm just with the guy.
Like, what's going on? Like, who am I talking to?
The Jacksonville event's going to be fun. I mean, there's a lot of people there. I actually have somebody I still forgot to talk to you about that I know wants to actually present there, I think. And that is on like, email inboxing and like a whole different world from any of the stuff that we've been talking about, right? But like the reality is that as good as your message might be in the distribution channel that you have, it's not going to be if the ISPs don't like you very much. That's it. Right?
Like that's like day one and day two is like existing business, like publishing subscription. Day two is let's open up the picture on some of these other, like, because like the VC thing is it's gonna be a huge trend.
It really is. I almost want to like it's interesting. We'll talk offline, but there's I always have ideas, right? That's one thing I'm very good at.
Yeah, well, I have
lots of bad ones, but at least some good ones.
Got a great story of a guy I know with a $2 million website. He did 100 million on the back end. Team of 5. We're going to talk about that. Right. And we're talking about like the parts that are legal for you to do in the US and the parts that are not, and how like the model in the US.
You had posted on the other day too. And he's talk about another entrepreneur who's so smart with tech, right? Like
genius. Yeah. I think he's gonna come in deep. He said he'd do a deep dive on like all the tech stuff that's working for him.
I'm telling you, I should be on the like pitch reel. It's telling
you are.
We're building it right now. No, because I mean, again, like you're talking about great value from these people that live it and do it and breathe it and are gracious enough to also open up about it, right? Like Matt is somebody who is very open about what he does, and you've given him that voice here also. So if you haven't heard from him before, watch that video. It's probably right below this one or something.
Yeah.
And if you haven't yet, like it's almost like a precursor. Like your pre-course should be, you have to watch Brett's, you got to watch Kenny and Charles, you got to watch Matt. And like, if you've gotten through this one, please go watch those and then come to Jacksonville, because that's what it's going to all like come together. Right.
Mm-hmm. That's my hope.
I can't even imagine what like crazy people, you just said the Bahamian exchange, but like, can't even imagine what else you're going to have going on.
Yeah. Well, we've got some good little surprises coming.
Sounds good.
For sure.
Luckily I can think on my feet. I'll be like, NMC roll. I'm doing stuff. I got to see how that goes. I promise I'll try and slow down. Like the one piece of advice I got before this that I fully didn't listen to was please try to slow down how fast you speak. But it's passion. I can't really not be me. It's tough. I love this industry. I love everything that we do. And I love that we really do have that impact on people. Like it's holiday time. Like people will write and say thank you. And like, even if they don't, you've changed people's lives for the better. Like it's great. And even if not, the people you've worked with, you've changed their lives. Like there's just all goodness out there, and just go put more goodness out there, right? It's a holiday time. Like
actually have a really great community of people in this business too.
Yeah, man. And most people really at the end of the day are good people at heart and want good things for themselves, their family, their customers. Like for the most part, we all have kids, and you know, it's yeah, good is great. I'm happy to be a part of putting that goodness out there. So let's get down to Jacksonville. Let's put some more good together, and let's get people really understanding that like there is a lot more out there. And like really, again, I'm gonna put that subject line out there again, right? The power of distribution in capital markets is no joke. It is an untapped well for us. It is an untapped resource for them. There is a value add on both sides. They want us. We need them. It's cool for us. It's very cool for them because they don't realize how many people we really interact with.
Right.
And that's what matters, right? And like it's not just us. There's people that have communities that aren't just email or just in our community. But yeah, that's we all need and want the same thing. And John and to a bigger credit, you know, you and Vince are putting together the ways of getting at it. So yeah, that's it. Like I said before, reach out.
Yep. All right, man. Well, thanks.
Yeah, man. That's what I'm here for.
You rock. Have a great holiday with the family.
Thank you. You as well. Merry Christmas. And I will
Happy
and I love
Hanukkah
the Christmas traditions, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you.
I appreciate that as a dad and a family guy. Yeah, for sure. And I'm excited to spend mine in a little bit warmer climates than this bomb cyclone thing. And yeah, man, I will speak to you later on and then in the new year, and I will see everybody in Jacksonville. It was a pleasure. Hopefully I didn't bore you too much.
No, this was great. I love talking to you, man.
Thanks again.